There is a secret buried under centuries of dust and silence, and it begins with a name that the whole world thinks it understands. His name is Rumi. People know the soft and gentle version of him, the one printed on posters, on cups, on greeting cards, the version that speaks of roses and peace and love. That image is easy to digest, easy to sell, and easy to control. But the real Rumi was not soft and safe. The real Rumi was dangerous. His words did not whisper. They burned, they tore chains, they frightened kings, scholars, and holy men. They broke rules that were never meant to be broken. Long ago, his poems were not seen as decorations. They were seen as storms. When he wrote about love, he was not speaking about romance. He was speaking about a love that destroys the small self, destroys the ego, destroys the illusions that rulers use to keep people obedient. His poems called humans to wake up, to think for themselves, to trust their own hearts, to see that truth does not live in a book or a temple or a priest. Truth lives in the soul, and every soul is equal in the eyes of the divine. Words like these are not safe. Words like these can start revolutions, and that is why some of his poems vanished. They did not vanish by accident. They did not vanish because time forgot them. They vanished because someone hid them. Some rulers feared his voice. Some religious leaders feared the freedom inside his words. Some scholars wanted control over what people read and believed, so pages were torn out, verses were erased, meanings were softened. His most dangerous lines were removed from public eyes. The world was given a cleaned version of Rumi, a safe version, a version that would not challenge power. Imagine ancient libraries where books stood locked behind heavy doors. Imagine priests and officials going through manuscripts line by line, deciding which words may live and which words must disappear. Imagine a poet who wrote from pure fire, and imagine the fear that fire caused in those who ruled through obedience and silence. This is not a fantasy. This is history. Rumi lived in a world where knowledge was power, and power was controlled by a few. His voice did not bow to them, and that made him dangerous. Yet some fragments survived. Some secret lines passed from hand to hand, whispered in private gatherings far from the eyes of authority. Some poems were hidden inside other poems. Some teachings were disguised as stories, so the meaning could slip past the guards of religion and reach the hearts of ordinary people. The rulers believed they destroyed his fire, but they only made it stronger. When people are told they cannot read something, they want to read it even more. When they are told a poem is forbidden, that poem becomes a key to a deeper doorway. This story is not only about poetry, it is about control. It is about who decides what truth is allowed to exist. It is about how power shapes history, and how history hides the voices that refuse to kneel. Rumi was one of those voices. In the next part, you will hear how the forbidden poems survived, who risked their lives to protect them, and why even today, some of his most powerful lines are kept out of the public eye. Rumi was not a poet who lived in quiet safety. His world was filled with war, politics, and religious conflict. Empires were rising and falling. Scholars were fighting over holy texts. Rulers were building kingdoms not with love, but with fear. In such a world, a man who wrote that the divine lives inside the human heart, not inside the walls of a temple, was a threat. When he said that every soul has direct access to the beloved, he challenged the idea that people must go through priests or rules to find truth. This idea was powerful, and power does not forgive those who take it away. Many of his most intense writings did not survive as official manuscripts. They survived as memories. Students memorized his lines and passed them to their students. Some wrote his poems on scraps of paper and hid them in clothing or jars or secret boxes under the floor. Sometimes a single poem traveled across countries carried by merchants or wanderers. The words moved like wind, free and impossible to stop. That is why, even when pages burned, the message did not die. There are stories of scribes who copied his verses in secret rooms, working by candlelight, afraid that soldiers might break in. There are stories of travelers who carried his poetry across deserts and mountains, knowing that if they were caught, they could be punished or killed. Some hid his lines inside love letters or business letters so no one would notice. Poetry became a code, a hidden language only the brave could understand. This is how forbidden words survive, not by resting on shelves, but by living inside human hearts. Slowly, a strange thing happened. The more the rulers tried to erase Rumi, the more people wanted to read him. The more the priests warned that his poems were dangerous, the more souls felt a fire of curiosity. Humans are born with a thirst for truth, and no chains can kill that thirst. When a poem touches the soul does not forget. So even with missing pages and burned books and silent threats, Rumi continued to spread. Then time played its silent game. Centuries passed. New kings rose. Old kings fell. Wars ended. Borders changed. And slowly, the fear disappeared. When danger was gone, people opened the archives and began rebuilding what was lost. They collected pieces of poems from every place they could find. One page in a church, one page in a private home, one page in a temple, one page in a dusty box that had been forgotten for 100 years. Scholars realized that Rumi was not only a poet, he was a voice of deep human truth, bigger than religion, bigger than politics, bigger than power. But here is where the story became twisted. Some of the collectors wanted to present a clean Rumi to the world, a soft Rumi, a gentle Rumi. They wanted a version of him that would not disturb anyone. So they kept the nice poems and hid the wild ones. They kept the safe lines and cut out the dangerous lines. The result was a Rumi that looked sweet and harmless, like a saint made of sugar. But sugar is not fire, and the real Rumi was made of fire. The missing poems did not disappear by accident. They were pushed into the dark so that people would not question the systems built around them. This happened not only in one religion and not only in one country. It happened again and again through history. Every time a voice rises that says humans can find the divine inside themselves, those in power feel their control shake. And when control shakes, fear grows. Fear always leads to censorship. Centuries passed and the world changed, but something strange remained the same. People still read Rumi, but they read a filtered version. They read a poet of comfort, a poet of flowers, a poet of simple love. They did not read the poet who challenged kings. They did not read the poet who warned that religion without heart becomes a cage. They did not read the poet who said that fear is the true enemy of the soul. Those lines were too sharp, too bright, too dangerous. So they slept in hidden manuscripts, waiting for a time when someone would wake them. In the last century, researchers began to notice that something was missing. They compared translations and found that some of Rumi's works were shorter, weaker, or strangely incomplete. A poem that once had 10 verses now had 6. A story that once had fire now had warmth but no spark. Lines that spoke of direct spiritual freedom were rewritten into softer language. The edge was gone. The danger was gone. The truth was buried again. This time under polite translation, some historians traveled across borders to search for the missing parts. They looked in old libraries, private collections, ancient houses, temples, monasteries, abandoned storage rooms, anywhere a book might sleep. What they found was shocking. Many of the most powerful poems survived only as personal notes in old journals. Some survived as fragments of lines written in the back of other books. Some survived only because a single family kept a handwritten copy for generations. It was like trying to rebuild a mirror from broken glass. The more they found, the clearer the picture became. The safe version of Rumi was not the full truth. The real Rumi spoke of a love that destroyed fear, a love that broke chains of guilt, a love that made religion unnecessary because the soul could touch the divine without permission. He wrote about burning the veil of shame. He wrote about breaking the walls that separate human from human and human from God. He called the entire world a single heart. And those who listened to that heart became dangerous because they could no longer be controlled. In one dusty archive, an ancient manuscript was found with lines that had been crossed out by hand. The ink was darker than the original writing. Someone had tried to silence those words. The crossed-out verses spoke about a truth that needs no priest, no ritual, no fear. The meaning was clear. The author of the censorship feared what those words could do. Because a free heart cannot be ruled, slowly, these hidden fragments began to return to the world. Scholars restored torn pages and cleaned faded ink. Poets translated the lines anew. The dangerous Rumi started to rise from the ashes. Not the sweet poet on posters, but the burning poet who spoke of freedom without chains. This version of Rumi is not sold in gift shops. This version does not decorate coffee mugs. This version stands like a flame in a dark room and says, "Wake up." Some readers are shocked when they discover this. They thought they knew Rumi. They thought he was gentle and simple. But the real Rumi is a storm. He is a voice that says, "Break the walls inside your mind and step into the fire of truth." Not everyone is ready for fire. Some prefer comfort. Some prefer sleep. Some prefer to let others think for them. For these people, the safe version of Rumi is perfect. But for the ones who feel the hunger of the soul, the dangerous Rumi is the only one that matters. And yet, there is still more hidden. There are libraries that have not opened their archives. There are families that guard old manuscripts like treasures. There are poems that are too sharp to publish in official collections. There are stories passed through whispered tradition that have never been written at all. Rumi is not finished. He is still unfolding, still rising, still breaking the seals placed on him by history. To understand why some of Rumi's poems were feared, you must understand what kind of world he was speaking into. In his time, religion was not a choice. It was a system of control. Kings ruled the body, and priests ruled the soul. People were told what to believe, how to pray, how to love, how to think, how to live, and sometimes even how to die. Obedience was called virtue. Silence was called faith. Fear was called respect. But Rumi did not speak the language of fear. He spoke the language of love, a love that did not need permission, a love that did not bow. When Rumi said that the divine lives inside the human heart, he was saying something bigger than philosophy. He was telling people that they did not need a middleman to reach truth. They did not need a priest to forgive them. They did not need a scholar to interpret their soul. They did not need fear to be holy. These ideas cut the chains that held millions of minds. A ruler can control bodies, but a ruler cannot control souls that feel free. This is why Rumi's words were fire. He wrote that the strongest prison is not made of stone. The strongest prison is made of fear. fear of punishment, fear of shame, fear of God, fear of making mistakes, fear of being different, fear of being alive. When a person is afraid, they are easy to rule. When fear leaves, freedom begins. For Rumi, love was not a soft feeling. Love was a force that shattered fear. Anyone who tasted that love could not be controlled again. One of the forbidden teachings said that the divine does not judge. The divine embraces. Not because humans are perfect, but because humans are made of the same light as the beloved. This was a dangerous idea. It removed the power of guilt. It removed the power of shame. If people stopped feeling dirty and unworthy, they would stop asking for forgiveness from authorities. They would stop fearing punishment. They would stand up and see themselves as sacred beings, not broken sinners. A person who sees their own value cannot be ruled like a slave. Another removed poem said that truth is not owned by any religion. Truth is like sunlight. It falls on everyone equally. You can build a temple to block the light, but the light will still slip through the cracks. Rumi wrote that every human heart is a temple. Every human breath is a prayer. Every act of kindness is a scripture. This teaching destroyed the idea that God belonged to one book, one priest, one path, one people. The powerful do not like to share power. The powerful do not like to hear that the smallest farmer or the poorest beggar can touch the divine without asking. Some rulers called these words dangerous propaganda. Some priests called them heresy. Some scholars called them madness. But ordinary people called them truth. This is why Rumi was loved by the people long before he was accepted by the institutions. The heart knows truth faster than the mind. The heart is not afraid to feel what the mind is afraid to think. And when a poem touched the heart, it did not matter who tried to erase it. The feeling survived. There are records of holy men who publicly rejected Rumi but secretly memorized his lines. There are letters written by rulers who warned about the power of his ideas. They feared that if people followed Rumi, they would stop obeying. They feared that if people found the divine inside themselves, they would stop kneeling to authority. Fear of losing power has always been the greatest fear of those who hold it. In many languages, there is a word for this type of knowledge, a word for truth that hides beneath the official story. Rumi's poems became such truth, not loud, not armed, not forced, but powerful. Soft words with the strength of mountains, silent lines with the weight of thunder. You can burn paper, but you cannot burn meaning. You can tear pages, but you cannot tear the human soul. When the forbidden poems spread, they did not move like armies or merchants. They moved like wind. They passed from heart to heart, from story to story, from breath to breath. You could silence a man, but you could not silence a metaphor. You could burn a book, but you could not burn a memory that had already entered the soul. Rumi's teachings grew in secret places, in hidden rooms, in quiet meetings where people whispered the lines that were too powerful to speak aloud in the daylight. Entire movements began to form around his ideas. These were not movements of violence. They were movements of awakening. People started to believe that the divine was not far away in the sky, but close, inside their own bodies, inside their own breath. They began to feel that the language of God was not fear, but love, not guilt, but compassion, not control, but freedom. For a ruler, love is a threat. For a priest of fear, love is a weapon that breaks chains. When the heart wakes up, obedience dies. In some cities, groups of seekers gathered in silence, waiting for a single line to change their lives. They sat in circles. They shared poems as if they were sacred medicine. A single verse could make a man stand up after a lifetime of shame. A single metaphor could make a woman refuse the cage she had been taught to accept. These were not small shifts. These were revolutions inside the soul. It is known that some spiritual leaders tried to use Rumi's name to gain influence. They took the safe parts of his teachings and presented them as their own. They removed the parts that spoke of freedom. They removed the parts that spoke against control. They wanted a calm Rumi, a loyal Rumi, a Rumi who would help them gather followers, not break the walls that protect power. That is how a poet becomes a product. But a true poem cannot be tamed. It waits. It survives. It returns. Centuries later, when borders shifted and old libraries opened, the world began to see that the popular Rumi is a shadow of the real one. Modern translators often removed words that sounded too bold, too human, too free. In some books, every sharp line was filed smooth, like a sword turned into a spoon. The result was poetry without teeth, poetry without fire, poetry that makes you smile, but does not change you. Yet the real Rumi did not write to make people comfortable. He wrote to wake their souls. Historians began to ask a simple question. They asked why the most powerful parts of his work were missing. They found the answer in letters written by kings and priests. They found rules that controlled which books were allowed to exist. They found records of poems destroyed because they were dangerous, not dangerous to the people, dangerous to authority. This is something many refuse to admit. The most censored knowledge is not knowledge that harms. It is knowledge that liberates. In some forgotten libraries, researchers uncovered manuscripts that had been locked away for centuries. The ink was fading. The edges were cracked. But the words still breathed. Lines that had never been published. Verses that had never been translated. They did not speak of fear. They did not speak of punishment. They spoke of the divine as a lover. They spoke of the soul as sacred. They spoke of the heart as the only doorway that matters. The deeper the discovery went, the clearer the truth became. The censorship was real. It was systematic. It was intentional. And it was global. This was not one religion or one king. This was a pattern repeated across cultures and centuries. Power always fears the same thing, a free human. But the most surprising part was not the censorship. The most surprising part was how much survived. Because human beings kept it alive, not governments, not institutions. Simple human beings who loved the truth more than safety. They passed the poems like fire in a cold world. They protected them like treasure. They hid them like seeds waiting for spring. When scholars finally opened the forgotten manuscripts, they expected poetry. What they did not expect was revolution written in gentle words. These hidden lines did not speak like the safe poems printed today. They spoke with a fire that could melt chains. They carried a meaning that could bend history. Even in faded ink, even on broken pages, the power was still alive. One verse said that every human breath is a prayer, and every heartbeat is a doorway to the divine. It meant that no priest can own holiness, no temple can own God, no scholar can own truth. If the sacred lives inside the human body, then no one has the right to stand between a soul and the beloved. This idea destroyed the business of control. Many institutions depend on fear and permission. Rumi erased the need for both. Another hidden line said that punishment is a human invention, not a divine language. The divine does not frighten. The divine calls, not with threats, but with love. This was a dangerous sentence because whole systems were built on fear. When you remove fear, the walls fall. When the walls fall, the rulers lose power. so the line was crossed out. But ink cannot kill truth. The meaning lived on. There were pages where Rumi wrote that the divine does not belong to one religion. He wrote that every sincere path leads to the same light, even if the paths look different from the outside. These words were too big for small minds. Leaders wanted to control which path was right and which path was wrong. Rumi said that the path does not matter. Only the destination matters, and the destination is love. A faith without walls is a faith that cannot be controlled. Some lines were even sharper. They said that a heart that loves deeply becomes more holy than 1,000 rituals. That compassion is more sacred than law. That a person who helps another person is closer to the divine than a person who repeats prayers without meaning. These words broke the idea that holiness belonged to priests. They gave holiness back to human beings, not as a privilege, as a birthright. Many readers who discover these verses feel something strange. They feel a shock. They feel joy. They feel fear. They feel freedom. Rumi did not write theories. He wrote experiences. He did not write from books. He wrote from breath. Every line feels like a hand reaching through centuries, touching a heart that is still alive. Some historians were afraid to publish these verses, not because of danger, but because of reputation. They worried that the world would be angry. They worried that people would not accept a Rumi who was stronger than the version they knew. They worried that readers wanted comfort, not transformation. But truth does not serve comfort. Truth serves awakening. The most powerful secret was simple. Rumi did not want followers. He wanted free souls. He did not ask people to worship him. He did not ask people to kneel. He asked them to love, to feel, to wake. A free soul does not belong to anyone. A free soul cannot be ruled. A free soul becomes a danger to every system that depends on obedience. This is why the forbidden verses matter. They are not old words. They are modern. They speak to every person living in a world where fear still controls minds. They speak to anyone who feels small, unworthy, ashamed, or afraid. They say that the soul is not broken. The soul is divine. The soul has always been divine. Even today, there are collectors and scholars who keep some of these lines hidden, locked away in private archives. They fear the reaction. They fear the change. But the world is different now. Information spreads in seconds. A line hidden in a box for 8 centuries can now reach millions in one moment. Silence is losing its power. The world has changed, but the forces that tried to quiet Rumi have not disappeared. They simply wear new clothing. Today, fear does not always come from kings or temples. Sometimes it comes from screens, from news, from systems that reward silence and punish honesty. Sometimes it lives inside the mind as doubt, shame, or the belief that a single person cannot change anything. Yet even in this modern world, Rumi's forbidden teachings rise like a mirror, showing that the struggle of the soul has always been the same. When Rumi wrote that the divine lives in the human heart, he was destroying the idea that people must stay small. He was saying that every person is born with a light that cannot be taken away. Today, many people feel disconnected from that light. They feel lost in a world of noise and pressure. They try to fit into shapes that someone else created for them. They try to become what society wants, and in doing so, forget who they truly are. Rumi's words call them back, not to religion, not to tradition, but to themselves. One of the forbidden teachings said that the greatest act of rebellion is to love your own soul, not as an idea, as a reality. To look at yourself without shame, to forgive yourself without permission, to let your heart breathe without fear of being judged. A soul that loves itself becomes impossible to control. It does not bow to pressure. It does not shrink under judgment. It does not break under silence. Another hidden line said that real prayer is not made of words. Real prayer is made of presence. You can sit in silence and breathe, and that breath is holier than 1,000 empty rituals. This teaching is dangerous in a world that sells spiritual identity like a product. It says that the divine is free. It cannot be bought. It cannot be owned. It cannot be sold. It belongs to everyone. Rumi wrote that every human is a bridge of light, but most people live as if they are shadows. Shame kills the light. Fear kills the light. Guilt kills the light. He wanted people to burn, not with pain, but with awareness, to feel life without filters, to feel love without permission, to feel the divine without needing to ask if they deserve it. The forbidden verses did not tell people what to believe. They told people how to feel alive. In the modern world, many people discover Rumi through short quotes online. They read soft lines about peace and beauty. They feel calm for a moment, but then they return to the same chains. The real Rumi did not want to calm the world. He wanted to wake it. His forbidden verses are not gentle lullabies. They are thunder. They are fire. They shake the walls inside the mind. Imagine a person who has lived their entire life thinking they are small, thinking they are broken, thinking they need permission to love or be loved. Then imagine that person reads a line that says, "The divine breath lives inside them," not as a metaphor, as truth. In that moment, something changes. A crack appears in the prison. Light enters. And once light enters, darkness cannot claim the same power. This is why the dangerous Rumi still matters. Not because he belonged to one culture or one faith, but because he spoke a language every soul understands. The language of truth without fear. The language of love without walls. The language of freedom without permission. Some say that if the world ever reads all his hidden verses, something huge will happen. Not a war, not chaos, something stranger. People will begin to remember who they are. They will stop thinking of themselves as sinners and start seeing themselves as sacred. They will stop being ruled by shame. They will stop being ruled by fear. They will no longer be easy to control. In the next part, you will hear how the legacy of the forbidden Rumi continues to spread, why some still try to silence him, and why his words refuse to die. One last piece remains. Today the world believes it knows Rumi. His name is printed everywhere. His quotes fly across social media. His poems are read in schools, weddings, cafes, and books of comfort. But what most people do not know is that they are reading only a small part of him. The safe part, the polite part, the part that never threatens anything. The forbidden Rumi still lives in the dark corners of history, hidden in old pages and silent archives, guarded by time and fear. Yet his voice keeps pushing forward, because truth always finds a way to breathe. Modern researchers continue to discover verses that were erased, softened, or rewritten. These poems are not sweet. They are fierce. They do not decorate the mind. They transform it. They say that every human being is made of the same light as the divine. They say that love is stronger than law. They say that the soul is free even when the world says it is not. These ideas are not welcome in systems that depend on obedience and guilt. So the old patterns continue. Some translations remove the sharp edges. Some publishers avoid the dangerous lines. Some leaders pretend the verses never existed at all, but something powerful is happening. The world is changing. Information no longer sleeps in dusty rooms. Books are scanned. Pages are shared. Knowledge moves faster than silence. A poem hidden for 800 years can now reach millions of hearts in one day. Rumi once wrote that no cage can hold a bird forever. He was right. The forbidden verses are flying again. There are readers who feel the difference instantly. They read the soft Rumi and feel calm. They read the forbidden Rumi and feel alive. They feel a fire in the chest, a voice that says, "Wake up," a whisper that says, "You are not broken. You are not small. You are not dirty. You are sacred. You always were. No ruler gave you that light, and no ruler can take it away." This is the Rumi that history tried to hide. Not a quiet poet who decorated culture, but a wild spirit who broke the walls of fear. Not a sweet philosopher of comfort, but a voice of pure love that burns through every lie. His words are older than nations, stronger than censorship, and deeper than any rule written by human hands. That is why the forbidden Rumi survived. Paper can burn, ink can fade, but the soul remembers. Somewhere right now, a person who feels empty will read a single line and find the courage to keep living. Somewhere, a person who feels unworthy will hear that the divine breath is inside them, and their heart will open like a door. Somewhere, a person who feels trapped will understand that their chains are made of fear, and fear can break. This is why no censorship can win. Love does not obey. The story of the forbidden Rumi is not a story about the past. It is a story about now. It is a reminder that truth is never destroyed. It only waits for the right moment to rise, and when it rises, no power can silence it again. If these words touched you, let them travel. If this story lit a small flame inside your chest, let it burn brighter. And if you wish to keep walking with us through hidden history and forbidden knowledge, you can subscribe, you can like, and you can leave a comment. Not for numbers, not for popularity, but because every voice that refuses silence becomes part of the fire.